But I want to start tonight with Donald Trump attorney Michael Cohen. At the end of May, Michael Cohen confirmed that he had been asked by House and Senate investigators who were looking into the Trump-Russia affair. He was asked if he would testify and hand over documents in conjunction with their investigations. And Michael Cohen said no. He said he would not cooperate with the House and Senate committees investigating the Trump-Russia matter. He would not testify. He would not hand over documents. He was then subpoenaed, so not just asked, but issued with a subpoena to testify. And after he got the subpoena, he said, okay, he will. Before Michael Cohen was a central figure in the Trump-Russia investigation, though, he was a longstanding Trump Organization executive. He has been Donald Trump's sometimes personal lawyer. And when Donald Trump first considered running for president this time around, when he first started kicking that around in 2015, Michael Cohen was basically his only political advisor for the early days of his campaign. And in some combination of all of those roles, Trump administration executive, or Trump Organization executive, personal lawyer to Donald Trump, political advisor to Donald Trump who might run for president, in some combination of all those roles, in the summer of 2015, so not this past summer, but the summer before, Michael Cohen decided to give a comment to a reporter who was writing a story on Donald Trump for the Daily Beast. And that story concerned allegations against Donald Trump that had been made once upon a time in a sworn deposition by one of his ex-wives. Now, Michael Cohen spoke to the reporters writing that story. He defended Trump from those charges, but then it got weird. Michael Cohen told the Daily Beast reporter that if that story ran, quote, I'm going to mess your life up for as long as you're on this fricking planet. You're going to have judgments against you, so much money, you'll never know how to get out from underneath it. Quote, rest assured, you will suffer the consequences. So you do whatever you want. You want to ruin your life at age 20? You do that? I'll be happy to serve it right up to you. Quote, I will make sure that you and I meet one day while we're in the courthouse, and I will take you for every penny you still don't have. And I will come after your Daily Beast and everybody else that you possibly know. Quote, so I'm warning you, tread very effing, although he didn't say effing, tread very effing lightly, because what I'm going to do to you is going to be effing disgusting. You understand me? Signed, Michael Cohen. Trump Organization lawyer, Trump's personal lawyer for many years, the man who managed Trump's early political maneuvering to run for president in 2016. Michael Cohen, coming soon to a congressional committee near you. He is due to testify September 5th before the House Intelligence Committee investigating the Trump-Russia matter. Hopefully they've got a bleep button in that committee if it's going to be on C-SPAN. As president, Donald Trump has had to hire some new lawyers, not just for the legal jobs in the administration. He's also had to hire new lawyers for the job of representing him in the Russia investigations. I think we probably should have known from the Michael Cohen experience what Trump likes to look for in a personal lawyer.
You're going to want to watch this next piece of video that we're going to show you. Rajaratnam is free on $100 million bail after being convicted on all 14 counts of conspiracy and fraud at his insider trading trial. He is set to be sentenced on July 29th. Prosecutors had asked for Rajaratnam to be remanded into custody, saying he was a flight risk. But the judge granted bail, although Rajaratnam will remain under house arrest with electronic monitoring of his whereabouts. His attorney, John Dowd, has promised to appeal those convictions. And this is the video that I was talking about. CNBC caught up with Mr. Dowd just a short time ago.
Would you like any comment for CNBC at all?
Get the out of here. Okay? That's what I got for CNBC.
That's what I got for CNBC. That gentleman, John Dowd, is one of the lawyers who President Trump has brought on in a personal capacity to represent him in the Trump-Russia investigations in Washington. That was CNBC's coverage from after Dowd's client, a hedge fund billionaire, received the longest prison sentence ever handed down by any court in the United States for an insider trading conviction. That's what his client got. Now that hedge fund guy's lawyer is on Trump's Russia team. But the captain of that team is a different lawyer, a lawyer named Mark Kasowitz. who President Trump brought to Washington to lead his personal representation on all things Russia. Mark Kasowitz is a little bit like Michael Cohen in that he has represented Trump for years in all sorts of different legal matters. He represented him in the Trump University fraud fiasco, where Trump ended up paying out $25 million. He represented Trump in an effort to keep secret the proceedings of one of the Trump divorces. He was the one who wrote to the New York Times threatening to sue the Times for publishing interviews with women who said they had been sexually assaulted or sexually harassed by Mr. Trump. You might remember Trump threatened to sue every one of those women, as well as the New York Times. He never actually did sue any of the women or the New York Times, but the threats to sue the Times came from Mark Kasowitz. So Mark Kasowitz is a longtime Trump lawyer, but now he has been shipped down to Washington to become the lead lawyer for the president in the most serious national security foreign influence scandal to ever hit this presidency or any other American presidency. And last night at almost exactly this time on this show, I mentioned that we might be seeing signs of some problems brewing, a little shakiness at the top of the president's legal defense team. First was this reporting from the New York Times that Mark Kasowitz is considering resigning as Trump's lawyer in the Russia matter. Today, Mark Kasowitz put out a statement saying that New York Times reporting was not true, but still, for what it's worth, that reporting exists. And there was this remarkable piece just published at ProPublica by Justin Elliott and Jesse Eisinger. It's sourced to more than 24 current and former employees of Mark Kasowitz's firm, as well as friends and acquaintances of Mark Kasowitz. ProPublica reporting in detail on one strange fact about this lawyer, Mark Kasowitz, who is leading the defense of the president in this highly sensitive national security foreign influence scandal. And that one strange thing to know about the president's lawyer is that despite this case that he is working on and the sensitivity of it and what it's about, the president's lawyer in this case does not have a security clearance. He doesn't himself have a security clearance, and he says he doesn't intend to get one, which means, among other things, that if there is any classified information that is involved in either the case against his client or the defense he is going to try to mount for his client, he can't even look at that information. He can't even have it described to him. If his client or somebody else relevant to the investigation ends up being asked to testify in a classified session somewhere, Mark Kasowitz can't even go into that room. ProPublica quotes Bob Bennett, who's a very famous Washington lawyer. He was personal lawyer to President Bill Clinton during the Clinton presidency. He says, quote, "No question in my mind, in order to represent President Trump in this matter, you would have to get a very high level of clearance because of the allegations involving Russia." But Mark Kasowitz doesn't have one. And the rest of this remarkable piece at ProPublica is about the possible reasons why Mark Kasowitz might not even be able to get a security clearance if he wanted to. And this, again, for the second time tonight, gets into personal stuff about drinking and rehab and what sounds like kind of a tremendous bar fight. It's just lurid stuff. And it is, as I mentioned, sourced up the wazoo. And this kind of stuff would be mostly personal in nature and none of our business if it wasn't for the fact that Mark Kasowitz is now the president's lawyer. And this stuff, described by ProPublica, it may affect his ability to get a security clearance, which really may affect his ability to provide effective representation to the president in this very serious scandal. Now, I talked about that story briefly on last night's show at around this time. And then something new happened. I'm going to recount this. We're going to go, just as ProPublica did, we're going to go back to reporter Justin Elliott at ProPublica. Quote, "Mark Kasowitz, President Trump's personal attorney on the Russia case, threatened a stranger and a string of profanity-laden emails last night. The exchange began after the man saw our story featured last night on The Rachel Maddow Show on MSNBC. The exchange of emails Wednesday began at 9:28 p.m. Eastern when the man sent the following message to Mark Kasowitz's firm account, meaning his email account at his law firm. The text of the message says, 'Mark, You don't know me, I don't know you. But I believe it is in your interest and in the long-term interest of your firm for you to resign from your position advising the president regarding pending federal legal matters. No good can come from this. And in fact, your name may turn out to be a disparaging historical footnote to the presidency of Donald J. Trump. So that was sent at 9:28 p.m. Eastern Time. 5 minutes later, Mark Kasowitz responded. It was a short response. F you. Now, again, these guys don't know each other, right? But I think this is adorable. He uses an asterisk for the you. We did not add that. This is the original. Emphasis in the original. He did that. Then 15 minutes later, the other guy doesn't respond to that, but 15 minutes later, Mark Kasowitz is apparently still stewing. And he sends this, quote, "And you don't know me, but I will know you. How dare you send me an email like that? I'm on you now. You are effing with me now." This time he spelled it out. "Let's see who you are. Watch your back." Word that rhymes with ditch that starts with B. So then, at this point, then the guy who initially started this exchange, then he responds 6 minutes later. And you'll notice he does not match the escalated tone that Mr. Kasowitz has thrown at him. He responds, "Thank you for your kind reply. Thank you for your kind reply. I may be in touch as appropriate." Then, 2 minutes later, the president's lawyer, Mark Kasowitz, continues to go nuts. Quote, "Call me if you want a conversation. I will have it with you. You are such a piece of Call me. Don't be afraid, you piece of Stand up. If you don't call me, you're just afraid. Call me." There's no response from the other guy to this email. But Mark Kasowitz is not done. That did not help him blow off enough steam. He is not done. Also, he's apparently not busy. 5 minutes later, dude is still erupting. "I'm Jewish." We think he's responding here to a Jewish-sounding last name from the person who was emailing him, maybe? "I'm Jewish. I presume you are too. Stop being afraid. Call me or give me your number and I will call you. I already know where you live. I'm on you. You might as well call me. You will see me. I promise. Bro." So that's the president's lead lawyer on the Russia investigation. The guy who he was threatening there, he says he has now forwarded this exchange to the FBI. For what it's worth, again, I am not a lawyer, but the "I know where you live, you will see me" stuff, that is not awesome for the president's lawyer in terms of whether or not this might legally be interpreted as a legit and criminal threat. Now, Mark Kasowitz, the president's lawyer, has since published an apology. I should mention, it's not technically from him, it's from a spokesman for him, which is a hard way to apologize, especially because we know he doesn't like work nights. But he says, the spokesman says, quote, "Mr. Kasowitz, who is tied up with client matters, says he intends to apologize to the writer of the email referenced in today's ProPublica story. While no excuse, the email came at the end of a very long day that at 10 p.m. was not yet over. The person sending that email is entitled to his opinion, and I should not have responded in that inappropriate manner," Mr. Kasowitz said. Quote, "I intend to send him an email stating just that. This is one of those times where one wishes one could reverse the clock, but of course, I can't." Okay, so on the one hand, this is hilarious. I mean, how do you even find people like this, let alone a whole stable of them, right? This is like you went shopping for all of your lawyers at the before section of the anger management commercial. Right? But on the other hand, the president, any president, really does need good legal representation. And I say that just as a matter of me being an American citizen and wanting what's best for the country. I mean, even if you are not a Trump supporter and you are hoping the investigations into the Trump administration and the Trump campaign, even if you are hoping those administrations are damning and he gets turfed out of office because of them, frankly, especially if you are hoping for that kind of outcome, it is my opinion, I think, that you should be hoping for him to have competent representation along the way. We have an adversarial system of justice in this country for a very good reason. At the end of the day, however serious this scandal is, it has to be resolved in a way that the country broadly feels confident in. Confident that it was handled properly, that the investigation was unimpeded and unintimidated and unbiased and thorough. And for it to be settled in a way that it is truly settled, we're all really going to need to have confidence that the president was well represented, that he got good legal advice through this whole process, that his side of the argument, whatever you think of it, was hard fought and well fought by experts who are good at what they do. Whether or not he wins in the end, you want to know that the investigation was fair and his representation was fierce and professional. And that's why these worries about these guys being his lawyers, I think, ought to be a bipartisan, above the fray kind of thing. I mean, Mark Kasowitz really did put out his first statement as Trump's Russia lawyer, misspelling the word president in the first line. His first action as President Trump's Russia lawyer was to announce that he was going to file professional complaints against FBI Director James Comey. And then he never did. Just never did it. Just blew it off. Michael Isikoff just reported at Yahoo News just a few minutes ago, actually within just the last hour, that Mark Kasowitz apparently received the Donald Trump Jr. emails about the meeting with the Russian lawyer in Trump Tower. He apparently received those emails 3 weeks ago, which, if true, raises some real questions about why the White House so spectacularly mishandled the management of information around that meeting and the disclosure of the emails themselves. The president's lawyers are his own choice, but it is also, unfortunately, a choice that is going to matter to all of us as a country as we plow through this scandal to its end and hopefully come to some closure as a country when it is over. And I have just one last point on this. The top Trump lawyer, who is not working for the president, but is the top law enforcement official in the Trump administration, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he today finally released, because a court ordered him to, he finally released the portion of his security clearance application that concerned his contacts with Russian officials. What they released from the Department of Justice is one page. It is almost entirely redacted, except for the part on the form where he checked no in response to a question about whether he or anyone in his family had had any foreign contacts with any foreign persons in the past 7 years. He checked no to that. We now know, since he filed this form, that that was an incorrect answer. He has since admitted to contacts, for example, with the Russian ambassador during the campaign. That means his security clearance application appears to have been incorrect. We spoke tonight with a lawyer who handled employment issues for the criminal division of the Justice Department for over a decade. That lawyer told us that omitting that kind of key information on a security clearance application would get any normal attorney fired from the Department of Justice. Fired. That said, the phrase "any normal attorney" is not one that applies easily to any part of this administration. We got a lot more ahead tonight. Stay with us.